Okay, Beyonders, welcome back to Tabletop and Beyond. This is Winning Warcry. We are happy to be here talking about lots of things Warcry. Not all things, but lots of things. I've got our usual cast of suspects here, Jason and Dan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
What's up?
And we have a special guest with us today. You may know him in the Discord channels as Armoire Enthusiast. He really loves closets. And we're happy to have Mike Sansom all the way from Madison, Wisconsin here with us. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm excited. Fun to be in here. I'm bummed I won't be able to listen and not be I won't be any surprises when I listen to this one after, but it's worth it.
Now, are you really an enthusiast of closeted spaces?
No, so it's an old Reddit name that I came up with literally just because I thought it was funny to imply that there are more enthusiasts. I mean, 0 through 6, and yeah.
That's what the 7's for. That's
I wanted
hilarious.
it to be the most obscure.
Oh, good stuff.
I'll be looking for those other 6
Yeah.
out there somewhere.
If you let me know, I'm trying to buy those names off them. I'm trying to move all the way up in the Armoire Enthusiast catalog.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you here today. We are going to be talking about a couple of things. We've got some news coming up. We're going to be talking the new Gorger pack from the new box that is coming out and breaking that down. I think Dan and I have some very significantly differing opinions about this, which will be kind of interesting. And then we're going to talk about something that we mentioned at the end of our last show, which was the idea of creating a community code of conduct as Warcry becomes, or let's say, blossoms into its own in terms of a competitive space, right? And so we're excited to sort of nail that down and open it up for the community to start thinking about what does a code of conduct look like for competitive events. But before we get into all of that, let's talk about what's on your hobby table. Jason, why don't you kick us off? What's on your hobby table?
It's not much. a bunch of random paints scattered all over the places. I've been helping kids do their school projects. So my daughter needed I did not do well in biology in school. She's like, Dad, help me understand the parts of a cell. I'm like, you got me. I had no idea, right? But so I went online and printed off an animal cell, right? That has all the I don't know, little floaty things inside it.
Mm-hmm. Scientific name.
Yeah. And I printed it off on the 3D printer, and then I gave it to her and just a bunch of paints, and she sat there and painted it and turned it in for a school project. So that's kind of what I've been doing on my hobby table. She got an A, so
hey,
I still have no idea what any of that stuff is, but she does. So
my kids are at the point where they're like, Dad, do you know about this? And I'm like,
Nope.
And they're like, but Dad, you told us you knew everything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dang it. I told her that 8 years ago.
Now this is me. Hey, Dad, can you help me with chemistry? No, I can't help you with chemistry. No, go ask your mom. I don't know anything about chemistry.
Yeah, good stuff. Dan Herrera, how was your hobby table?
Good. I am almost done with an Ideneth Deepkin warband that I think I just started it, maybe just built it by the time last month's pod came around. So now I'm almost done painting it. I also painted a lot of little critters, I painted Duneclaw and the little spine fin fish, and I painted a little Zinch pig to be I don't know, maybe an iridescent horror someday. Most of these were for a tournament that I ran called the Gnarled Goose Chase, where people chased around little animals as part of the tiebreaker for the mission. It actually worked really well. My problem with tournament quests, if anyone listening has been to an event, you forget your tournament quest every single time. That is part of the ritual of the event. Is midway through round 2, players learn that they should have chosen the tournament quest earlier in the game. And so we tried having essentially 3 tournament quests that were live at all times for every game. And so essentially you just counted 1, 2, 3, how many you got. And, one of them, only one of the two players could score it. And so it worked really well as a tiebreaker, I think. And, some players sort of went all in just for scoring it. The two players who had the highest score, they both had 11 out of 12 possible points. They were both in mid tables instead of at the top tables. So doing a separate prize for the winner of just the most tiebreak points without their actual tournament stuff turned out really well, because it was a prize that wasn't going to the top players, which was great. So yeah, really liked that. Mike was actually at that tournament, beat up some children, and then talked quite a bit of shit to the kid's
Sounds about right.
dad
Sounds about
before
right.
getting beat by the kid's dad. So that was pretty great to see.
That's awesome. Like, all right, let me teach you how this is done.
It's
and
functionally
then,
what happened.
Got the revenge for him. Yep.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I know Mike has a lot to talk about, so I want to let's see. I have been working on a bunch of my models. I'm turned around looking at my hobby table. Because I'm going to grab it real quick. So one of the things that I ended up doing over the last week was having fun with oil paints. And so I started painting some of my bigger models with oil. And so I'm going to take off this. So everybody can now see my hobby space right there that I have. So I did this Trogoth in oil painting. And you can see, I really like the way that his skin and back and everything came out. And it was effortless, I painted up this Fulmoroid Crusher. And you can see, I really like the way his skin and stuff turned out. And the pigments in the oils are very vibrant. And that's something that I noticed, especially and people who know me know how I feel about GW paints at this point, but especially some of the GW paints, their pigment isn't that great in some of their pots, and some of it's intentional, right? They don't they want to have it more translucent so you can kind of do layers and stuff like that. But with the oils, the blending is super easy. And I also did my Chimera right here,
Nice.
right? So here's the wings and the body and the heads and all that. And so I got the 4 Chaos Gods represented there. I've got Khorne in red, Tzeentch in blue, Slaanesh in purple, and
and their Nurgle body. I love that.
Yeah. So the great thing again about the oil paints that I have been doing is this it doesn't take very long to get those blends. And so the skin, to do the Fulmoroid Crusher skin, it took me maybe 30 minutes, which is crazy because I would have spent a lot of time trying to glaze and get the right blends and all that stuff. And with the oil paints, it's just so much easier. Now, there's definitely a learning curve to using oils. It's a very different, it's almost painting reductively in a sense. And you definitely use a much more sketching way of doing it. So I'll put my dark shadows in the dark shadows and then my highlights on the highlights, and then I blend them together from there. It's not I just do one giant base coat and then try to layer it on, because then it starts to look a little muddy because everything's blending together kind of funny, so but once you kind of figure it out, it goes so fast. And I was kind of surprised about it. Now, would I paint some of my little Corvus Cabal maybe in oil? I've seen people do it, literally on YouTube do that. I don't know, because there's pretty fine details, and oil kind of gets a little funny sometimes. And so I don't know, but with these big things like the Chimera, the Fulmoroid Crusher, I'm going to be doing the Ogoroid Myrmidon here later. Those nice big kind of centerpiece models, I love doing these oils on it. So just because you get those very rich colors too. So it's been fun. it's been a nice change to kind of like the idea of like, okay, I got to batch paint these 5 like, or like batch paint this war band, and just trying to crank it out or whatever. So it's been a lot of fun. Anyway,
what oil paints are you using?
I've got the Winsor Newton Artists oil paints. I got a box of it at Michael's for like $38.
Yeah.
Pretty
easy to get a full set of oil paints too.
Yeah. And the thing about oil paints that's interesting is that, like, I mean, if anybody's watched Bob Ross, which we all know we have, right? Like, you're looking at the paints and you're like, phthalo blue, cadmium yellow, Van Dyke brown. Like, I mean, it's all the same paints that you see, like, that like all of these other painters are using, because that's the line of paints that oil. I mean, it's all the same pigment paint that they do. Now, there's some variation between brands and stuff like that, but when you get a phthalo blue, I know it's like a very dark blue that's almost like an indigo, and there's like a ultramarine yellow or ultramarine blue or something like that, which I thought was like for ultramarines, but I guess like, even people outside of Warhammer call blue ultramarine blue or something like that. So, kind of funny.
Weirdly, ultramarines do not wear ultramarine blue. Ultramarine blue is dark grayish purplish blue, and ultramarines wear cobalt blue, which is the funniest thing, and maybe a little dumb. Or do they wear cobalt blue or royal blue? Now I think they might wear royal, but either way, they do not wear ultramarine blue.
Yeah, it's really funny. So anyway, but I have had a really good time painting it. I think that there's some, if you guys are interested in looking at how to do oil paints, because again, it's so fast, especially with your big stuff. There's some great YouTube videos. Maybe I'll throw them in a link at the bottom that like I started with and had some great tips to get started. So anyway, but yeah, that's been my hobby week. I've gotten a lot of the big models that have been sitting on my shelf literally for like a year or 2 years, like ready to be painted, and I just haven't gotten to them. So it's been kind of nice.
Got those allies in the Chimera ready to just terrorize the local scene now too.
100%. Here I come. They keep asking me when we're going to do another event at Huzzah Hobbies, and now I'm ready. Now I'm ready. Yeah. All right, Mike. Let's kick it over to you. Tell us about your hobby table.
Yeah. So, like Dan said, I went up to his tournament, and I have an issue with not being able to play the same warband really ever, and needing to start over from scratch and kit bash a whole bunch of stuff. So, let's see here. Let me find out if I'm clicking on the right stuff. We're just gonna click and see what happens. Shoot, I can't find them in here. Window. Here we go. This is, so as Dan described, this isn't the models. This is hobby technically, not on a table, but about to be put through a table. This was my you guys see that?
What? What's happening here?
So it'll make more sense in a moment, but this was after I had played my my littlest opponent of the day. Actually, yeah, no, let me.
This was the kid?
Yes, yeah. This was Eric locally. His son came with us to play. I had heavily themed my warband to be.
Wait, did you wear that outfit like throughout the tournament? Amazing.
Yeah,
he gave up on the
I adjusted
wig halfway through, but the rest of it he wore the whole time. Knee pads.
It was hot. It was it was super hot.
Yeah, it was.
So yeah, sorry. This would make more sense now. My warband that I took was Spire Tyrants. This is some of them. So heavily kit bashed, obviously, but I made them all wrestling themed. So Stone Cold was the leader. So I was dressed as Stone Cold, obviously. Switched out the got a local guy to help me out. 3D printed a chair. I think that's the only 3D printed thing in the entire warband. I made a little belt out of green stuff and painted it again. And this was all painted within like 12 hours before the tournament started again because I
my God.
have planning issues. But yeah, so Stone Cold was the leader for the Spire Tyrants, and then this is the one of the models that I didn't play as the model from Spire Tyrants, but both of the guys on the left and the right were best Ogors. So we got Undertaker over here. You can't quite see it, but that's a shovel from, I think it was from Curse City that I switched the bits on. This hat was one of the witch hunters, switched them out on there too. And this is a throwback over on Mankind. That club is from I trimmed that off for Adepticon for one of the trolls. So I had that left over and thought it would look cool as a big kind of spike bat that Mankind used to drag around. He's got Mr. Socko on his hand here.
Dude, this is insane.
So,
I mean, I thought your NBA Monster Jam one at Adepticon was great, but you've got like, you know, like the WWF like wrestlers, which is fantastic.
So yeah, there's a couple of them. Hold on, I got the rest of them here too. So I played with 3 netters. So here they are. The paint job again was rather rushed and not completed. So Hulk doesn't have his mustache, but I green stuffed this shirt on him. It's really hard to green stuff a ripping shirt, it turns out. Big pain in the butt. We got Macho Man in the middle with his tassels hanging off there.
Which are the nets? That's so great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tried to make them all seem some kind of netty way. The shirt may be less convincing than the other two, but and then famous Jack Black character Nacho Libre on the right side here.
Nacho.
Exactly. That's as he threw the net. Had to be said every time. So, and then the one other one that I had, I brought an Ogroid Myrmidon as the ally. For these guys.
He better be the Rock.
It's, you know what? He wasn't. The Rock was really hard conceptually to try to illustrate in a model. I was like, sure, I can like paint an eyebrow on a muscular guy, but is that going to look different? So I decided to go with the Big Show.
Okay.
And I that made him a ladder out of the Red Harvest box.
Yeah.
Put those guys together. Gave him his classic onesie on there, and this is the Goblin King model from the Lord of the Rings set that GW does. So it was a super fun warband to come up with, and then, like I said, source all the bits, and yeah, it was fun to play too. And so yeah, sorry, that makes more sense now, right? When you get to see that why I'm carrying a child while I'm dressed as Stone Cold Steve Austin.
It's an interesting like confusion of immersion.
Yeah,
because I'm like, I'm playing Warcry, and I'm like, I really feel a good strong theme with your warband, but I'm struggling to feel it in the 9 realms.
There, anything can happen, right? It gets crazy. Magic.
True.
Just woo.
Yeah, right. We meet in the center in the epic of the 9 realms connected.
I also want to know what the Venn diagram of like 90s wrestling and Warcry is. Like, where does that meet? Like, who are those people that, you know, like enjoyed both? Like, maybe it's more aligned than we think. You know,
we're all like fighting with like blood tooth daggers, and all of a sudden a portal opens, and you hear like chairs smashing on top of people's heads, and you know.
It was really fun to like play narratively. Like, I mean, it was a competitive event, obviously, but like putting a narrative spin on like all the actions and stuff. At one point, I had like a quad 6, so Rampage with Stone Cold, who's carrying the chair, like sprinted up like this onto this platform, and then bashed the killer boss over the head with it. So it really made for fun, a descriptive play, which was a blast.
Good.
How many did you have jump off of like a ledge and come top rope on some of these people? You know?
I'm disappointed with myself. It never happened, unfortunately. It never came up in the game, and it should have, because I should have just done it irrespective of if it was a good play or not. So.
Yep.
Exactly. From the top rope.
I did. We also got a picture of again after I'd been defeated by the big boss that was the kid's dad, who I ended up playing against. This was just after, came at him with the chair.
That's awesome.
So and it was a super fun event. Like Dan was talking about with the animals and stuff like that. It was a really cool twist on it, and really easy to remember, to not worry about forgetting your tournament quest. You're like, no, I want to carry the magic pig. It's for me, not you. So chasing each other and beating each up over it. And then two more quick ones I have for October. I've been working on, we just started our next narrative league yesterday locally. And I've been conceptualizing this warband for, I don't know, like a year. I think I started doing it. So I've been working on making, I'm calling them Shoruks. So iron jaws that are all shark themed. So this is a pretty early
Oh, nice
thing, but yeah, I got one of like the ogre horns, from the stone horns, I think, and turn them into I didn't think about it, and everybody pointed out that like, oh, it's like Moana basically, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess it kind of is. So I got him worked on. I got
leaving the rock out of your last warband.
What's
exactly
that?
You're making up for leaving the rock out of your last warband.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I got him, and then I got this guy green stuffed, turning him into a shark there. So yeah, it's just fun.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Just messing around with them, having a good time. I got lots more ideas to come up with for that one, but first couple of pieces are in place. So just having a blast, the usual mischief and chaos, putting
it's
stuff
like
on models.
Old SNL show, like Land Shark. You remember that skit?
Yeah.
SNL? Like knock knock. Like, who is it? I heard you deliver a pizza. You better not be that Land Shark.
I was thinking Street Sharks too, the old cartoon. Again, turns out I only have 90s like ideas, basically. It's just bring them, upcycle them into my war bands. But yeah, messing around with the Street Shark cartoon that was around for a while too.
Interesting. Well, that is pretty. I wish that I were creative enough to do that kind of stuff. I find myself like thinking about stuff and being like, like I don't know if I'm lazy about it or what, but I know that like modding stuff, like I'm just not like that good with it. You know,
it takes me a long time. Like I really plan them out a lot, and like part of the most fun for me, I think, is actually like doing the conversion and like coming up with the conversion, getting like a prototype and then or like mocking it up basically, and then once it comes time to like cut and green stuff, I'm just like, now I'm really nervous and I don't want to do this part because I like to better in my head, but yeah, it's work, and if you don't enjoy that part of it, then there's no point in doing it. But yeah, that's the part that I really get excited about.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that those are like you've obviously shown us that you've got like a lot of great great ideas, my friend, because I was super impressed with, again, the Monster Jam, that you had at Adepticon. And I hope that you bring this to another event so I can see them in person, even if you're not playing them.
I'll bring them just for you for Adepticon. Keep them in the box just so you can stare at them.
Yeah. So
I'll play narrative, actually. That'll be perfect. I'll play them in the narrative day.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, lots of hobbying going on. Except for, well, I guess Jason's doing his cell stuff, so yeah, that's cool.
Not being with my kids.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, those kids.
Don't discredit me for being a dad.
Let's talk about some news. And I'm going to take this back to the 1st of October. And let me present this here. I'm going to take this back to the 1st of October when they did the Sunday preview. A rabble of war bands are heading to the mortal realm near you. So this was kind of like a joint Warcry, Warhammer Underworlds thing. And I'm going to skip over the Underworld stuff right now, even though we'll probably see those come back. Obviously, they announced the Hunter and Hunted box that came out that has the Ogre Gorgers and the Wild Core Hunters. I think for the most part from the community that I saw, was love it reaction. I mean, most everybody I saw was like, this is an auto buy for me. I know I felt that way when I saw this. Like, I just love the models. who doesn't love good doggos that, are going to be the best of the goodest of boys out there, and I remember when they kind of teased these before saying, I don't care if their rules suck. I love the model so much. I'm going to totally get them, and I totally did. I pre-ordered it because, that's what you do. Now, we are going to talk about the Ogre Gorgers today. We'll probably talk about the Wild Core Hunters next time. But the thing that I wanted to bring up here, because we didn't get a chance to talk about this at the last one, is there something missing with this box here? Like, what is the thing that is missing here? And I'll show you. I'm going to scroll down. Nope, it's not these other two warbands, even though that would be nice. Ah, there it is. It's the terrain. They forgot to put the terrain in the box. And I know a bunch of people were saying, hey, like, oh, it's okay. Like, that way I can choose to buy the terrain if I want to, or I can choose to not buy it if I want to. My take on this is that this was GW's way at a cash grab. Like, this is their way of sticking it to Warcry players who love to collect everything that they can and get a lot more money out of this box that wasn't already worth the price point of probably $200 that they were going to sell it at. Because I think that the terrain's pretty weak in here.
Well, how much is the Hunter and Hunted?
130.
130.
Yeah, I mean, so that's like $65 per warband, which is not untypical today. So
right.
I actually think it's priced reasonably because you also get a book and you get that funny terrain piece.
Okay, all right.
I think this is priced better than the previous boxes.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so that part I don't disagree. I think the Hunter and Hunted is great. How much is this separate terrain box though?
112 for this guy.
$112 for this.
Be a lot.
Like, that's ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? Because like if you had combined those two together, that is let's see, it was 100. What was the 100 and 100 box again? 130. Yeah, plus 112. So you're talking $250 almost.
Mm-hmm.
For a box that should be priced at $199 in all reality, in my opinion.
I don't quite understand the terrain anyways. It's first of all, it's more gnarlwood, and like I'm good with gnarlwood now. I know they're mixing in this jade stuff, but there's 3 pieces that have elevation and the rest are just scatter terrain.
Yeah, it looks like there's 2 scatter sprues in there, and then they've got like the one on the left is like the old gnarloak, which is kind of they released the rules for free this week. That one, like, you could just knock stuff off basically out of nowhere, which is kind of interesting. The board is not on here. It is actually kind of cool. It's like a double swamp board, and it actually has like mechanics built in and like baked into
the board. Has mechanics. Interesting.
Yeah, it's printed on there, and so like if you're holding, I can't remember, I skimmed over them the other day, but it actually matters. And then so like the centerpiece there, the kind of archway bit, that can basically turn the swamps on or off to do different things. And then the very top middle piece, that one, you can use it. I think it's like a double, and you can like make one of your abilities like 6 or change the value of an ability or something like that. So it's got some interesting rules to it. From a value side though, like, I mean, as someone that buys it anyway, like, I'm not excited because it's going to be more, but like, I get it from the standpoint that like, it's easier to pick and choose for some people, and you're not going to have to buy duplicate sprues. However, the value is decreased within each individual product for what you're getting for that price. But also, like, the terrain cards came out, and the mall pit is actually on the same cards as this terrain is. So my interpretation of it was maybe they saw sales not going so well with Heart of Gur, which is kind of a lot of the jib jab that we've been hearing about with it. And so they kind of pivoted and just started printing different boxes for it, split it up to try to make it a little more appealing. And again, we don't have to buy the same box of terrain, the same 3 trees at least, but good and bad, depending on your perspective.
The average player had just given up on those boxes, on those like full terrain board boxes. Most players had just totally given up. So I think they had to get away from it. Yeah. Whether this is what you wanted or not is separate, but yeah.
Well, no, I 100% agree with everything that you guys said. First off, like I said, the Hunter and Hunted box I think is priced right. You know what I mean? I think the cost with the book and the mop pit and the 2 war bands, I didn't balk at that price at all. I just don't think they're going to sell this terrain for $112. Like, you know,
you compare it to like the old Ravage lands and it's a Ravage land as well. Those were, I think, 90 MSRP and this one's 112. So that kind of lines up with, like, compared to the last time they released one, that's probably right in line with like the hikes they've had every year for like here's our hand wave 12%, 20% kind of thing. But again, you gotta be excited about it, right? And
it's just funny because you look at it. Where do they have a picture of it on the table? Hold on. It might not be this one.
I thought they had the dwarf, a picture of the dwarves all over it.
It's this. There's that, right?
Oh, never
So
mind.
you can kind of get a scale of like what these are, right? Like one model fits basically on those types of things. But I think there was a picture. No, I didn't see it. There was a picture of like it all set up on the table, and it looked pretty sparse to me. You know what I mean? And it's unfortunate because, you know, that first Warcry box is so universally praised about how amazing it was, you know, and the value that you got from it. I remember when I got it in the mail, like it was like hefting it from my front porch. And now like these ones, I'm just like, oh, okay, like rattling it around like it's Christmas morning. Like what's actually in here? You know, but anyway.
I like that they split it up because I'm not interested in the train, so now I can just get the warbands.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting, and I wonder if the terrain's even going to sell that well. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm kind of curious, and if it doesn't, does that affect what kind of terrain releases we're going to get for Warcry in the future? You know, which is unfortunate because I think terrain is such a big important part of Warcry. You know, so. Way more than Age of Sigmar, you know. So
I'm curious if they're going to do the solo release for the Maw Pit as well, just because it's obviously got a lot of play. Like I think they said that you can just use it as a proxy for the Maw Pot.
It's on the same footprint.
Yeah. It's huge. I saw it yesterday. The thing is massive. I was kind of amazed. It is. I mean, it's a full sprue that you're getting. Obviously the size, you know, it's kind of like an Underworld size box, but like, you
can use it as a proxy for the Ogor Mawpack.
Yeah, they said it was on the same footprint. I haven't seen the two of them put next to each other, but they said it was on the same footprint. Yeah.
I haven't seen a Mawpack in person. I would wager that this one at least feels bigger. Whether it is actually bigger or not, it certainly feels larger.
It does, for sure.
I wanted to get a whole board of them, and then when I saw last night, I looked at it on the board. Like I wanted to do 5 of them to make like a cool board of push everybody in pits, and I was like, I don't know if that's gonna fit on an entire
Warcry Sarlacc.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Some of those AOS terrain pieces are huge, though. Like the Gloomspite Moon is just massive.
It's massive.
Yeah,
they're great to mock up Warcry terrain with. Just stick some platforms on there, and you got a playable piece of scenery. Super
moon
cool.
with
the
platforms,
moon with a platform
I love it.
would be pretty cool. Yeah, and the corn altar makes a great Warcry piece too.
For sure. Yep. So obviously they're also previewing the Cruel Boys Monster Killers, which we talked about on previous shows, as well as the Flame Seekers. I think it's funny that both of these are all about the eggs. Do you know what I mean? Like these guys are stealing them, and these guys are trying to protect them. You know, so I can't wait to get that box.
They're coming separate, unfortunately. But man, I wish that we had gotten like the Easter egg battle of Gur, and we'd gotten maybe the what is it the Fire Slayers have? They have the pizza oven, right? If we'd gotten like a Gur themed pizza oven to go with like an all egg battle, oh man, it would have been great.
So one thing that I wanted to touch on, this is really funny because I had put out in our Warcry channel on our Tabletop and Beyond Discord the idea of a universal shove ability, because I don't feel like you get enough like play in terms of like getting people off of platforms. Like a lot of times you get somebody up on a platform and they're just stuck there because you have to roll a 1 on an attack and then they fall off, you know. And so I love the idea of like maybe being able to like just go up and shove somebody. And we were like going through in the chat of like, well, how do you like make this work? Like, you know, do you use your strength? Do you use this other stuff? Well, in this Hungry Gorger Mawpack, here's how the Hungry Gorger Mawpack stacks up against the Wildcore Warcry article. They had an interesting little bit here that was about where is it? It's down here. That was talking about the Mawpacks, right? And how you can push people into the Mawpack. Right here. Ability, triple, get in the pit. After the next melee attack action made by this fighter in this activation that targets a fighter with a lower wounds characteristic that is on a skull platform or within 1 inch horizontally of the Maw, roll a dice and add the strength characteristic of that attack action to the result. If the result is 8+, the target is taken down. So what's interesting is I think they gave us a bit of a template here on how you can shove, right? I don't think you take this whole ability wholesale because this is obviously very specific to the Gorgers, but I like the idea of being able to approach a model, use an ability, whether it's a double or triple, like whatever you want to figure that out to be, but you add your strength characteristic to a dice roll, and if it's like an 8+, you can do it. So, like a little goblin trying to push a big old honkin' ogre, like they only have a strength of 2, so it's probably not going to happen. But you know what? You never know. You might roll that 6 and it happens.
You gotta have to. It has to be a lower wounds characteristic though. So a little goblin can never do it to a big guy.
This is where I'm saying I think this is because it's this is a Gorger ability. You take that part out. I think that they've given us a little bit of a.
This is an auto.
I think they've given us a little bit of an ability to play with this a little bit to give a universal shove ability that you can dislodge treasure carriers from platforms or get people out of objective areas or whatever but it's on a dice roll. It's an ability. I think it'd be kind of interesting.
So, my only issue, because I do love these abilities like in concept, in narrative, but I don't love discouraging players from getting close to the terrain. I want to be taking pics of my guys fighting other people's guys on the terrain. I don't want reasons to stay away from it. I want reasons to get on it. Just a minor nitpick. I think in general with the GUR terrain, they've done pretty well with that. For example, that big vertebra piece that they've got rewards you for getting inside the creepy little crawl space in there, or there's that big skull on top of a tree where if you get onto it in round 1, you can actually call someone in early. Which is really powerful if you can do it, if you're fast enough to do it.
Yeah.
So I prefer it when they encourage you to get on the terrain compared to when they encourage you to stay away from it.
When I think, Justin, your idea wasn't necessarily strictly just pushing stuff off terrain,
right,
but a general kind of shove, right? So even if you're just standing on the flat on the battlefield, just being more being able to influence where other models are positioned, like enemy models are positioned.
Yeah.
But I agree, Day. Yeah, no, it's so much more fun when you got models that are climbing up on stuff, and much more interesting to look at when you're playing a game.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a reaction with this as well. That came out with all of the kind of the reviews as people were talking about. If you're if someone attacks you and all of the attacks miss, then they fall into the pit. But if they hit you at all, then you fall into the pit, which is phenomenal. It's just a all risk, all reward kind of thing. But there's so many cool ideas with it. Then if you're standing on the little skull at the top at the end of a narrative game, you get an extra. You get to add to your roll for renown because you're the hero, obviously. So they themed it super well. It's got some really really fun mechanics around it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to this book coming out. Obviously, we're going to be looking forward to the Fire Slayers and Cruel Boys warbands coming out as well. But the last thing that I wanted to touch on was that all of these warbands, Underworld's warbands, are getting rules. And we've been waiting for this for a while because there's a lot in here. There's the Witch Hunters, there's the piratey ogres with the monkey and a knife in the tail. People were just like totally waiting for these rules to come out, and it seemed like every other day in the chat sometimes like, hey, do these have rules? When are they coming out? And so we're looking forward to them coming out a little bit more. So that'll be really good. Yeah. So so some of them don't. Some of them already have rules. Like Xandiria's has rules, right? For it, but they're coming out as standalone without like all of the extra underworld stuff. So you can buy some of the ones that already have rules as separate warbands themselves. Obviously, they probably don't add up to 1,000 points, so they're just supplements to a warband. But it'll be nice to get them on their own and play them in Warcry as well.
And hopefully having the models available means that we're finally going to get those Nether Maze rules. We got rules for dogs now, but we need Gore Hulk rules. I know the rat people are fiending to get the the Claw Pack rules, and potentially an expansion for Canine Shadow Stalker, so they can have more bad models to use. What a selection they can have!
Yeah, I would love to see it too. I heard a horrifying theory that Underworlds and Warcry is essentially to sell off some of the sprues before they go bad, essentially, or sprues that need help. And apparently Nether Maze sold too well, so they're just not. They don't have extras that they need to sell, so they have no reason to put it in Warcry. And so that's the horrifying rumor that I've heard, but I don't know if it's true. Either way, I don't know if we'll ever get those Nether Maze rules.
They'll come in. Don't say that.
Yeah.
What does that mean what does that mean for Curse City when they tried to sell the models from Curse City into Warcry?
Yeah.
And then they tried to sell the Curse City boxes without models for the price that you would pay for having the
dude.
Let's not a word.
They can't all be bangers.
Yeah. Well, we hope that some of them could be, right?
Bangers.
We'll take some bangers, at least.
Yeah, we'll take some.
Bangers and mash.
Yeah. So a lot of good stuff coming out, though. I will say this though, with those war bands coming out with their rules as standalone as well, I think it has dashed any hope of getting a Tome of Champions in November, December. Right. I think there's some people that were really had their fingers crossed and hoping that we haven't gotten the rules for some of these ones yet. And that's because they'll come out in a new Tome of Champions. And with the, new Cities of Sigmar and Orc models that have been coming out and stuff like that. Yeah. Sorry, guys. I think at this point that hope is dashed. There's a slim chance we get a spring Tome of Champions, sort of like how we got it for what was it, the 2021, 2022 one that came out in spring versus the fall or December.
It almost still February though. It was still pretty the 2021 that came out in 22. I think in February. So I think there's a slim, and when I'm saying slim, 99.3% chance that it's not coming out in that time. So a 0.7% chance that it's happening. So you're telling me there's a chance. So I think there's a slim chance there, and if not, we're talking about probably Warcry 3.0 in the summertime or something like that, where we see updated rules and points and things like that for all of these. So yeah. That's my having seen that with the war bands right here, getting their rules like that, I think killed a lot of people's hopes, some people's hopes anyway, about getting a Tome of Champions in the fall. So anyway, yeah, good news, guys. We got a lot of good stuff to talk about. So let's talk about right now. Let's talk about the Gorger Mawpack, and I'm gonna share this right here. Okay, so here's our 5 fighters. This is a great opportunity for us to really dive into every single fighter of a warband. Dan kind of hates it when we do that with some of our warbands, but I think we've got the liberty to talk about them here, Dan, since there's only 5 of them.
We can zoom in on this pick, right? Or else
we've
got some Warcrier options too.
Hold on. I'm gonna save this image and open it up a little bit bigger.
And let's let the person who's most excited about them talk. Who thinks that they are the one most excited about them while Justin's picking that up?
Jason, I think you almost fell out of your chair there. Did you want to?
I think I like them a lot. I love the models. Of course, we have had horrific Gorger models forever. So we finally get some. What's interesting is we finally get Gorger models that look very similar to all the 3D proxies that you've been buying off of Thingiverse
Weird.
and other places. So I don't know, but
this is like Apple instituting the facial recognition
right.
after Samsung did it, and they're like, "Hey, I did that."
Yeah,
yeah.
Hey,
there's a dude in my LGS who plays Warcry with a year-old Seraphon proxy models, and you cannot tell the difference between the current GW ones that came out 6 months ago and his year-old ones. It's really funny.
That's awesome. These are great sculpts, I think.
I think the two biggest ones are really incredible. I don't like the face of the leader, but the body is really amazing. I think the Howler is really cool. The little ones look like they're supposed to be flesh eater quartz.
When you say little,
the babies. Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They look like they're supposed to be flesh eater quartz, but like excellent flesh eater quartz, So I'm not upset about it. I'm just a little bit of nitpick there, but they're really good.
Kind of orky jaw that they have. Like this guy right here looks like a logging like mega boss kind of.
Well, the two rows of teeth. How do you like the 2 rows of teeth on the lower jaw?
Yeah, it's so great. It's very good.
Man. I find it a little bit like it's more disturbing that way. It's like I feel like it's weirdly less intimidating than if they just had like effective teeth, like alligator teeth or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like I find the teeth on some of the Seraphon models to be more intimidating than these, but it does like up the disgust factor, and that's I think a big part of what they're going for here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And these ones all look kind of rounded as well, implying that they have been gorging themselves on things that are perhaps not typically gorged upon by your average folks. So really blunted off those teeth. And so maybe it's more intimidating, but you really have to think about why it's intimidating, which defeats the purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or with that toughness 3, they won't be gorging for much longer. But we can get into that later.
Ouch. Low blow.
All right, so let's talk about the leader who you love so much, Dan. What do you like about him?
I just think, the bigger the model, the more that charge ability that they've got. They don't call it charge; they call it something else. I think they call it bounding leaps. But it's the exact same as charge. If there's a visible enemy fighter within 6 inches of them, they make a bonus move. Must finish closer to the closest visible enemy than they were at the start of that move. You can use it all kinds of ways. The faster you are, the better it is. And that move 5 plus like a big chunky chassis to push around that battlefield. I just think bounding leaps on that leader is going to be so impactful. It's going to be excellent. I'm pretty low on this warband in general, but I think that leader with that bounding leaps ability is going to be like, even once you failed to make this warband work on the table, you'll be playing that leader for years because the leader is excellent. I just think, just accelerating that body around the board is going to feel good every single time.
So this leader also has the ability to add 1 to the damage of its hits and critical hits for a double. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm just going to want people to take some duct tape and just like put it over most of that, most of that card over there so that you don't accidentally trick yourself into reading anything that's below Glimmer of Consciousness, and then you're going to be in a good spot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay.
But the
So
those top two abilities are good. I mean, the second one is not good. It's like covering for a horrible drawback you've got, but it's like very necessary, and it's going to be what
it's
makes it
necessary.
work. But
Yeah.
but that top ability obviously is incredible. So that's just what I'm excited about, is that leader with bounding leaps. I think is going to be huge.
I do kind of like this triple of Madden Blows. It reminds me of the triple Chilled Touch from the Spirit Host and Night Haunt, right?
Mhm.
And for Night Haunt, that was it Chilled Touch or Frightening Touch? Anyway. But basically, it lets you have that treats all your hits as critical hits. This one only gives you critical hits on 5s. Right.
It only gives you hits on 5s on someone who only has 2 swings anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Boop, boop. Yeah, you got it.
So the only way to make that useful is to spend another ability dice with a Brugit to give him more.
Mm-hmm.
I think
then it's real good, but
have to bring
you could do better.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and he's already toughness. He's already strength 6, and he's 4/8. So I think it's kind of a waste, in my opinion. He's already hitting on 3s. Yeah. He's already hitting on 3s on like almost everyone, and he's doing a 4/8 damage profile anyways. You might as well just use Onslaught and give him another dice roll.
Yeah, I agree with Jason. Yeah. And that Onslaught's going to give you more damage because turning a 4 into an 8, you are already going to get a hit anyway with the Onslaught. Probably you'll get another Onslaught if you're attacking twice. I mean, it's just
Yeah, Onslaught's better for sure, and Onslaught's a double, not a triple.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you bless those guys, which is kind of, I think, the only way that they have real play, like throw the 30 points on them to make them 3 attacks, 6 strength, 4/8 damage. Mm-hmm. It starts to become more relevant. You get that's terrifying. All of a sudden, some big stuff is disappearing in a hurry. And the 2-inch range, you're paying a lot for it on those guys, but I think you build around it. It sometimes can be good. It's expensive though, because you're paying $215 for a model that's swinging 3 times. That I mean, it's killing stuff, but 3 attacks versus 4 attacks, you really feel the difference on those two.
If you're doing that, you're probably cutting the 220 point model to replace with this guy with a +1 attack ability, and then you're going, or maybe you're just paying for it by going Brugit, Boggle-Eye, and then cutting one of the other Gorgers, and then you've got 40 points left to play with, and that's how you upgrade it. But either way, I mean, the opportunity cost is the hair model, and I guess I'm not sure on the map. Well, with a Brugit in play, this guy getting +1 attack is better, but without the Brugit, I'm not sure on the math on which one's better.
So this guy right here, who's doing the Avenger pose, right?
I didn't think of it that way. That's
great. Marks, get set, go.
Gonna have to green stuff some hair on him and make him Thor now. This is gonna be my Avengers warband, I think.
Oh yes, I love it. I love it.
Appreciate the inspiration.
Tell me the hair one up here is Black Widow. It has to be.
Oh my God. Have you seen that Black Widow movie where her protege is just making fun of her for doing the pose all the time?
Yeah.
And then finally late in the movie, her protege does the pose and it's like, oh, that does feel pretty good. Okay.
Exactly. So this guy who's doing the Avenger pose, here's the thing. 175, 3 attacks, strength 5, 3/6 damage, toughness 3. He is a savage big boss, but he has an extra point of movement and he has 5 more wounds. So, yeah, I mean,
for the same price too, yeah.
For the same price,
so he's getting the beast discount.
So I don't think he's a bad deal. The downside is that pesky beast rune mark. I mean, like that does suck. But I'm not terrible. I'm not totally down on these guys. I would like to see them on the table.
Beast rune mark by never playing on the OG terrain where there's doors everywhere.
I know. Yeah.
You can mitigate it by tricking your opponents into never playing with treasure missions.
I mean, like that is the thing, right? Because you're gonna have to use like Glimmer every time to do
Or
anything, right?
Well,
Trick-
it's
trick it into not playing more than like 3 of these guys, or two Beast Rune Mark Ogres, and bringing friends, Bladeborn, and that kind of stuff in, right?
yeah, absolutely. And I guess this is where I'll get my rant in. It's like, okay, so these guys are going to be great on certain kill missions, like,
Yeah.
Reaper and things like that, or, my hunting missions, stuff like that. But you're not going to be able to win any objective missions. And they also, on treasure missions, most treasure missions have a bunch of treasures. And these guys are really only going to be able to fight over maybe 2 per turn. And it's just like you have outs, but you need so much to go right, and you need your opponent to walk into all of your traps, which is, it's not like you can never win, but man, it's going to be tough. And so when you have a warband that can only function in like one type of mission, that's just a tough place to be.
To win treasure missions, you've got to kill all the opponent's treasure carriers.
That's
what they have to do, because they're not going to win it on a holding treasure type of thing.
Well, it's the
They've
same
gotta
with objectives, right? You just got to
It's the same with
take
objectives.
the body count down.
But
Now,
that's what
the
Elite
bounding
Warbands are
leap
doing
helps.
anyway.
Yeah, the bounding leap helps a lot. Like if they can bound into a cluster of guys that are like around an objective. Dan, you're shaking your head, but I honestly,
it's not going to work, man, because you're bounding, leaping, and your strongest fighters aren't even as strong as their strongest fighters, because your biggest guy is 235 points. What are you going to do if the other person has a FOMO crusher? Like, what are you going to do if they have a FOMO crusher and a bunch of cheap guys? Like, they're going to kill your guys faster than you kill their guys, and they have more guys than you. Like, it's the worst of both worlds. Is just, that's where I'm at with, like, if we're getting competitive with them. Now, I would rather talk about how sweet they look and like how hilarious,
They have
this and that is.
The narrative fluff for them. The leader has a heroic trait that lets him pick up as many treasures as he wants and not have to slow down with them, which is amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome.
And I think there's either artifacts or a trait, or it'd be artifacts that you can give the guys to just dump the beast room. It's a collar, so they kind of domesticate them so that they can get rid of the beast. The fluff is awesome. I'm excited to get to read the whole book. Again, I've seen some stuff on it and it looks amazing. Yeah, for fun play, these guys are going to be super fun for sure.
I'm here for that.
I think, Dan, if you put this in the hands of somebody who has practiced with them, understands their pitfalls, knows where their weaknesses are and how to mitigate for that, right? Like you put this in the hands of a good player, straight out of the box, just like this, I bet they could go 2-2 at a 4-game tournament. They might be able to push a 3-1.
I mean, I've seen good players go 2-2 with Cypher Lords. Like, yes, a good player who knows their warband can do really well with bad warbands, but like you cannot win against another good player with this warband unless you get to be on a kill mission against them. Like if you get to be on Reaper against them or something, then you can do it. But you've got to get
this
so
warband
lucky.
Will not beat Peter American Cabbage's like gets list. It will not
on any mission, not even kill mission.
Any mission.
Fun fact: Peter is currently messing with these guys. A couple of us are talking about the new warbands, and this is the one that Peter's excited to try out. So hopefully for the November tabletop league, he might be joining and bringing some big Gorger boys. So we'll find out. We'll find out what the skill level can take them to.
It's going to be interesting because like the advantage that he had with his gets list is that he had cheap chaff that he could ally in some heavy hitters and all the the brew gets and stuff like that for free, not taking up an ally spot, right? Like that's the advantage of the gets. He doesn't have any cheap chaff in this one.
Yeah, the only way to get chaff is to ally the chaff in.
Yeah, you ally your brew get in your boggle eye.
Something that I think is going to be fun to play with this is these guys all have beast rune marks. I want to play them with an Icebrow Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
On a double, you can make anything with 4 inches with a beast rune mark get a free attack. So I've got a funny list going where I've got an Icebrow Hunter, like 3 of these Gorger models, and 2 Brugets. So buff the puppies up and have them run around with the Hunter, and the Hunter gives them a free swing, and then they're going just bananas with their sticks and things. But at the end of the day, it's still just a killy group. But I think it could be fun. Play off the Beast Rune, Mark.
Hrothgorn can do that too. He's the same as the Icebrow Hunter. He's got that double for it.
Yeah,
and Hrothgorn can then bring in some cheap chaff for them too. Yeah.
But there's also I think I did a quick search. There's only like 3 heroes that have that kind of thing in destruction that can make somebody with a beast remark do something, right?
Chaos is a lot better at that.
Yeah, and so that's the other thing is these are destructions, so you're limited to how you mix and match the soup only in destruction for that, right? And that's kind of my other problem with these is that because all these, besides the leader, all of the rest of them can't be allied into anyone else's list. So you have to build into this list, and you only have a couple options to do that with it to get you, kind of a strong competitive list with, an appropriate amount of chaff there. But I think it's going to be fun to play with. But I'm kind of in your court, Dan. It's going to take a long time for someone to build a list around this that makes it be able to win, and maybe not out of the box the way it is today.
Yeah,
I don't think a single box is going to be terribly good, to be honest. I think you're in a really rough spot with 4 of your 5.
It's going to be fun like round 1 and round 2 where you feel like you're bouncing all over the place and swinging, and then you're going to realize I can't get any victory points.
Yeah.
I toyed around with bringing Manok in with these guys, the Cruel Boys one, because and then bringing in Boggle Eye, so you can have 2 nets in there, and you add. So basically, I think the list was the leader, 2 of the long handle guys that are blessed, Manok, who's another 2-inch. You got good range on him, and then you bring Shank, and then the Boggle Eye. So you got 2 nets that can kind of help you pick where you want to make your fights happen a little bit. Again, still 6 models, right? There's a lot of, and I'm happy to get weird with blessings and stuff like that, and I'm very comfortable playing with very low model counts. But I think a lot of people are not going to enjoy that play style, especially once your 35 wounds leader with 3 toughness is lifted round 3, and you're like, oh, that's a lot of my damage potential gone.
Well, and honestly, a big Achilles heel for them is going to be like the Soul Blight Gravelord, Skelly list, where it's like, yeah, sure, they can kill a skeleton in one swing, but there's like 20 of them. So it's like good luck chewing through that many skeletons,
And they didn't get the double for the kill or move on, or attack or move on a kill, which I was really surprised by.
I was surprised by that too. So,
and skeletons can do a really dirty thing to charge where they come up, they're not within 1 of you, so you can't attack them, but then your charge can't move because they're 1 1/4 from you. And they've got the bodies and the shambling hordes to go out and do it. And then so you can't actually charge anywhere because there's a skeleton 1 1/4 from you. So you have to be closer than 1 1/4 to the model you're charging. And so it like completely kills charge. And so clever Soulblight players can do real dirty stuff. Like, they can resurrect something within 1 1/4 from you. They can do all this stuff. They can get there with shambling horde and basically completely neuter anyone who's trying to move around the board with, what I do think is one of the best abilities in the game: Bounding Leaps, Charge, Hungry for Flesh, Sadist, maybe not. They're Slaves to Impulse, right? Like all the groups that have it, it's one of the best abilities in the game. But
for sure,
some factions can like completely neuter it so that it's almost like it's not even there. So that is, another thing that can happen in competitive play against some of those crafty European swarm players that luckily we don't have to play in the States.
I do like their reaction. I think it's a better reaction than the base ogre reaction.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So that reaction, which it's not showing here, but that reaction is very similar to the gladiatorial display with the Daughters of Cain. Except Daughters of Cain, yeah, they do it on a 4. They do 4 damage and not 6. So that's the only difference. Like you have to roll, and if you don't roll a crit, then the attacking player takes 4 damage.
Yeah.
Or 6.
Again, from narrative, like that's going to be wild.
Yeah.
Like they're just pumped. As soon as you get 3 renown on something, it's going to be crazy to see. And you straight out of the box, if you're just playing a fun little game, somebody sends their dog into you. That dog I think they've got 2 attacks. They've got to, you go ahead, try and do it. No, I'm going to react. There's 6 damage. Your dog is dead. So, yeah. To just lift the models in a hurry with.
I mean, 6 damage is a lot, especially like if you think about like a Stormcast Eternals guy that may only have 3 attacks or something like that. The chances of them getting a 6 is like not that high. And so you could potentially do. I mean, but would it be better if you just swung back at them? I mean, for some of these guys, absolutely.
In like a non-narrative setting, I think it's a very, very situational where you're gonna be attacking the thing anyway, and it's gonna double attack you if you don't counter it or if you don't get that kill on the first action. So again, very, very limited like use for it, but I think the leader is just a cool side grade though. It's another vegetable in the destruction soup, right? Chucking something else in there to another option to do some different things, and because it's you compare it to like the regular ogres right now where they have to get a kill to get their extra action versus this you can charge in and then double attack something. So the action kind of sequencing changes a little bit, and you might want that sometimes for what list you're building. So it's an interesting one. I also just realized as we're talking about them how much they remind me of like 40k orcs where they've got like the bandoliers all over their bodies with these bones. Kind of making ammo all over the place.
Daka.
Yeah.
That's funny. So I was going to ask you, is this leader worth allying in some destruction bands? Like, would you take him in a Cruel Boys list? Or I mean, a Cruel Boys list, he could be really nasty.
Mm-hmm.
I would take him. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would take him in Iron Jaws even. Just like having that movement. I think he fits in a really nice space. There's nothing in between a Mega Boss and a Crusher right now. And it's like, if I, for whatever reason, couldn't quite fit a Crusher in my list, I had 240. Would I take this leader over a Mega Boss? I think in most lists, I probably would. I think it's close. I think I'm more excited about a Mega Boss for 225 than I am for this leader for 235. But if I had 235 in the list, I think I would take this leader over
this guy's got 5 movement versus the Mega Boss is 3, right? So,
right. I mean, that's huge, right? The Mega Boss is going to win fights that this guy won't win, but that's okay. Yeah. He's still amazing. I think he's good.
It reminds me of kind of like the buffet that Chaos has, basically, where you can really get exactly what you want. And this is just another, again, it's like a side grade from all of these different options where if you're looking for a specific thing, you've got another tool that might fit what exactly you're looking for, which is really cool to have. Just what Destruction needed was another great ally.
I was just going to say that. Just what
but that's kind of their thing, right? That's how they're built. Like, Soulblight and all of the death ones are like, here, we're gonna throw 1,000 models at you. None of them are gonna be crazy big, but I think the general or the Grand Alliances are getting pretty clearly defined. The more and more
order is like, we have dwarves.
Yeah, that's
I sit here going like, what's orders like? Bum, 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 bum.
Well, it is the year of the dwarf. I mean, we had another big tournament that was won by a bunch of dwarves, right? I mean, dwarves are good. It's just order without dwarves is so silly. This guy I do think is better than like Chaos has that smorgasbord of options. I do like this guy better than the 235 point Chaos Premier guy right now, who's the I think the Bloodkine with the one big axe.
Oh yeah.
Really solid model. Very similar in that it's like 5-inch move, offensively focused. But I do think that this Gorger guy is better than the Bloodkine is.
Interesting. Well, I can't wait to get it. I can't wait to paint him up, and I can't wait to put him on the table and show Dan that yes, they actually can. compete. But I mean, it might take me a long time to be able to prove that. So.
The first person that beats Dan with the Gorgers in a list that Dan cares about that thinks is good gets. I'll make an award. I'll send it out to you.
That's right. The Gorger Award. It needs to be like a soup bone that you get from like the butcher shop.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. Awesome.
So Dan, you
All
got to
right.
keep a tally. You got a bounty on you now for a Gorger beating.
Dan for the next year is only going to play Gorgers now.
I mean, that's been true for me for the past year and a half, no matter where I go or where I play. So this is good. This is more of that.
and with a worse warband in your opinion. So right, they have to play one that's easier for you to beat.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Well, great discussion on that. I can't wait to talk next month about the Doggo list and how that's going to work. Because it seems like they got some tricks in their bag that they can use. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. But let's get to
December. We want to close out the year of the dwarf by doing the dwarves.
Fair enough. All right, we'll do it.
If we have the rules by then. We still it's the only one that we haven't seen the rules for yet. I've been like every like hour going on YouTube and seeing if somebody's uploaded a video. Just anywhere I can go. Like I've seen people comment on people's videos like, "Hey, did you get the dwarves yet?" And they're like, "Nah, it's dry out here, man. It's no no dwarves here. Keep looking."
Yeah, it'll be good. I'm excited for them to see what we get. So, well, let's talk about our main topic today, which is the player code of conduct. And I just want to kind of preface this a little bit with how we kind of left our last podcast, which is that I truly believe that the Warcry competitive community is taking significant growths right now. I have said for the longest time that it is a shame that Warcry came out in 2019 because I think that they had plans to make it similar to a kill team, and it ended up tripping in during COVID, right? And I know that like I was excited to like run tournaments. They had those like store tournament packs that you could get, and they just all sort of went to naught because of that. And so a bunch of people stayed in their homes. And they played it with their wives or girlfriends or friends that, didn't care about quarantining with each other or whatever it was, or even their kids. And it very much got a reputation of this is a great narrative game. And it is. It is a very good narrative game. I think it's probably one of Games Workshop's best narrative games out there. Of course, you can play 40K narratively. You can play AOS narratively. You can play Kill Team narratively. But this one seemed to have those narrative bones baked into it from the get-go. With that said, I see this all the time on Facebook and some of the chat rooms and stuff like that. Warcry is not a competitive game because of all the randomness. And we can go into all the things of why that's not true because I know it. I saw it at the Nova Open. Warcry is absolutely a competitive game, and it can be. And I think more and more people are starting to realize, hey, I like this skirmish game. I like the fantasy setting, and I like the competitiveness that I just am not getting with either Age of Sigmar or some of my other things that I'm doing. So the community is growing. And I think what we see when a community is kind of small, but it's building out, more people are coming in, you're starting to see players really bring that competitive edge to the table. And sometimes it can feel like they're shooting angles a little bit, right? They're trying to squeeze all that competitive juice out that they can. And sometimes it can lead to negative play, or negative play experience. Let me say, sometimes it can lead to, questions about like, did that really happen? Did they not know the rules very well? Did I not know the rules very well? There's like a lot of questions about like, how this is. And especially when you're finding kind of a mix right now of some very competitive players coming in and mixing with people who are like, oh, I'm just going to go play at a Warhammer tournament with my very narrative list that I'm bringing, and it's kind of like, okay, like, where are we mixing right now? So all of this to say that I think Warcry competitively is moving in a very good direction, and a very competitive direction, which I think is good for the game in general. But that presents its own challenges, right? The challenges being that we need to create an environment, especially as tournament organizers, to make sure that we have a good experience, that we promote a good experience for all of our players. And that's kind of where we left off our last discussion, and where I wanted to kind of pick it up this week is if we're looking at from the perspective of tournament organizers, how can we put into place like a code of conduct or something like that for players to understand where the guardrails are in terms of having a positive experience. So let's kick this off here of like, what is a code of conduct? And like, have you seen this implemented well in other gaming systems? Have you seen it not implemented well? Like, what do you guys think? Like what are we talking about here even?
I mean, it's tough because the best implemented ones just don't come up. Which so then it becomes tough to say like what are the good parts of the ones that are implemented well. I mean, part of it is definitely having tournament organizers that feel pretty clear about what they're interested in enforcing and what they're not. But that's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about kind of creating a code of conduct that then players can read and take a look at. So what are the building blocks of it? I guess you would want to talk about sort of what your pre-game conversation is supposed to look like, and then standards for how you conduct maybe some of the basic actions that come in the game, and then how you treat your fellow players. I would say maybe those are sort of the three, I guess, pillars that I could think of. I don't know. Does anyone else think, just in terms of generalities, does anyone have sort of a major pillar that they'd want to make sure would get taken care of other than those three?
What was your middle one?
So it was pre-game conversation, like taking care of like core game actions, like how one executes core game actions.
Fair
and
play.
Then, yeah, essentially, yeah.
Like dice roll, like how do you do your dice rolls? How do you declare things?
Roll, right?
Like don't hide your dice from me. Make sure your opponent can see your dice rolls.
Right, like if you have a dice tray, you do it this way. If you don't have a dice tray, you do it that way. I mean, I recently watched a AOS thing on
what is a
Fair
cock
Play
die? Like what really is a cock die?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. No, but that's great. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think it has to be very casual player friendly, but it's got to be, aimed towards being able to enforce it for bad actors too. I mean, I saw an AOS symposium on Fair Play, I guess you would call it, by a pretty popular content creator, where like one of them was like, I use a dice tray, it's great. And then the other goes like, yeah, I asked my opponent to use my dice tray. And then it like escalated to this point of like, anyone who doesn't bring a dice tray is an asshole who should not be allowed to enter tournaments. And it's like, whoa, okay, you guys missed like somewhere along the line here. You guys really messed up. Right? So
that was a runaway truck.
Yeah, exactly.
Brick killed the guy, right? It got out of hand in a hurry.
Yeah.
I think I really like especially like the conversation. I think we're playing a game together. I think having that be a conversation, right? The game. And I think beforehand, figuring out what the definition of how you're going to talk to each other is. So I like that, like kind of the different areas that you described there, Dan. I think another part that I really feel kind of passionate about is that there's different people that you're playing against at every tournament, right? And I think understanding beforehand if there's almost like definition of like not going to like I'm a competitive player, I'm like a casual player, but like when you're playing someone who's playing their like second game of Warcry ever, right? And you know you're going to be hand holding a little bit and helping them out, and so maybe having kind of this like a discussion about like what are you doing, what are you looking, what are your expectations out of this game, and then how do we play with that together. So I think flexible and inflexible kind of version of what this game can be, right? So flexible being like, oops, I kind of goofed on this one, is it okay if we are able to take this back, setting that expectation up front, whether it be from a TO perspective or from a gameplay perspective. So like, yep, it's totally cool. I'm happy we'll have this kind of back and forth where we're going to allow it with each other, or setting it so like, nope, once you've moved that piece, you cannot move it back, whether you realize it's a misplay or something like that. I think having that really hard and fast before the game is super important. And again, I think just those expectations of how you're going to interact with each other is something, and again, I think there's almost like 3 different levels that you could put in there, maybe more, but it's kind of like then the 3 different tiers you kind of layered down. I think these are almost like lined up across like the columns to the rows and that kind of stuff in a way that I feel like it's just really important to understand how you're talking to each other.
So I think that part of that falls into like just the general category of player etiquette, right? Because I was fortunate, and Jason also kind of will attest to this, but we were fortunate to learn Age of Sigmar from one of the nicest guys ever. His name is Matt Barker, and he's like seriously like one of the nicest people ever. And when we would sit down and talk about our lists and things like that, he would just say like, I want to explain everything to you. I don't want to do a gotcha hammer. Like me hiding something to spring it on you is the wrong way of playing. If you're going to beat me, or I'm going to beat you, I want to make sure that it's done in the right way, and the way that he would sit down and walk through his list, that he would walk through all of his tips or his tricks that he could pull. And he would do them later, and in the right time, in the right way, but it never felt like, oh man, you totally hid that from me. And now we have a negative play experience. And so I think that kind of player etiquette right there of really kind of saying like, I want to have a good game with this player that's sitting across from me. Like that should be the root of everything that we're talking about here, right? Which is I want to facilitate a good, fun game here. It can be super sweaty. We can be like literally like playing our guts out here, but a respectful, good like game. And that should be the driver of like sharing your list beforehand, like, helping somebody out that might be struggling. Like, hey, you want to take that move back? No problem. Go ahead and do it. Like, because some of this gotcha stuff, like that's where it gets not fun,
Yeah.
And
so
go on, Jason. You go.
Yeah.
First.
Okay. I was going to say that I like your kind of breaking up the segments, Dan, earlier. I think there's like pre-game, there's game execution, and then there's post-game, right? You could probably break it into those 3 categories. And what happens in pre-game is kind of something Justin was talking about. There's list overview, right? And like when we played Age of Sigmar, that we did have code of conducts in a lot of the Age of Sigmar tournaments we went to. And one of the code of conducts is, you print out a list, you have a copy of your list for your opponent, you give it to your opponent, you give them an opportunity to ask questions about your list, right? And that's an opportunity to avoid the gotcha hammer that can happen. Like, oh, I hope he doesn't see this one thing so that I can use it on him when, and that's where I think that's where you have some explicit, tangible things that you say. There's good players of, hey, I know you're looking at my list. You might not have caught this, but this guy is actually really critical. You want to watch out for this guy. Like that's a good play experience. But they're not necessarily required to do that. And if they don't do that, doesn't mean they're a bad player. That's why we give boundaries like, number 1, you must print off a copy of your list, hand it to your opponent, and give them an opportunity to ask you questions.
Yeah.
So you give a very concrete, tangible thing to try to drive that player interaction in that early phase. I think another one that we talked about in the middle phase, in the execution, is I think it actually helps to be very clear on how are we going to roll dice. Cocked dice is a great one. Oh my gosh, I've seen so many dice be re-rolled that were not cocked. Right. Oh, it's a cocked dice because it was like touching a tree. I'm like, but okay, whatever, just do it. But, and I've seen rules like your opponent if your opponent can put a dice on top of that and it doesn't slide off, then it's not cocked, right? So you can put things like that in. Another one is takebacks or missed rules, right? If your turn is over, until your turn or your activation is complete, you can take back. Or once your activation is complete, or you've moved through an action into another action, like there are no takebacks. No, oh, I forgot that guy actually has 3 attacks, so I'm going to roll an extra dice. Like clearly defining those things helps avoid situations that people can get stuck in, where one person might be okay with it, but the other person may not be, and then you have a conflict that a T over has to come over in.
I'll tell you one thing that happens to me all the time. I'll hide a guy around the corner somewhere because I don't want him to be seen. And then I'm like, two rounds later, I'm like, I never moved that guy.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, I didn't use him last turn. And as soon as the words leave my mouth after we've rolled priority for the next round, I was like, oh, I never moved that guy. I look at my opponent and I go, and I never will.
Yeah.
You know?
Like our last kill team game, right? Like Turning Point 5. You said, Jason, I don't want to get you mad, and then you pointed at a guy that I never moved the entire game. I just forgot he was there.
And one thing that I think is tough with some of these is, for example, like printing out your list to give to your opponent is something that is like really important to do, but almost no one does it.
Yeah.
And I do wonder in a really casual space if it's a little unfair to expect that from people. But at the same time, I do think it's a bit of a red flag for maybe playing in good faith if someone has a cheat sheet for themselves but did not print a copy to give to opponents. I think that's a bit of a red flag in general. And then the gotcha hammer, one thing I've heard that I kind of like that's a little bit from AOS is trying to compensate for elements of the game that are like encouraging gotcha hammer. So AOS has a few different things, like if you're within a certain bubble of me, I get to do a thing. And then it's like, yes, I explain it to you at the beginning, but I'm explaining to you 40 different things and your eyes are rolling back into your head and you can't hear it.
Yeah.
And so the thing I heard was the first time you walk into this trick, like I'm going to explain it to you at the beginning. And then the first time you walk into it, I'm going to explain it to you again and give you a take back. Well, reactions in Warcry are like really playing in that space of like encouraging players to gotcha hammer each other. And so, for example, the Cruel Boys reaction is a great example. Like you stepped in my bubble, I get to kill you now. No one in their right mind would have stepped into that bubble knowing that they would die for doing it. And so giving them a reaction or a take back on the first one, I think is really important. But at a certain point, it's like, well, I did build this list trying to create bubbles that I force you to step in that now you die. So I can't give you a take back every time because that's not really fair to me either. So saying like you get a take back the first time you step into the first time you blunder into a reaction, you should get a take back. But then after that, at a competitive event, you probably shouldn't after the first one.
Yeah.
And then maybe at a casual event, you get like at a narrative event, you could say you get 2. I mean, like Magic does this where they have competitive REL, they have professional REL, and they have casual REL. I think they actually have a few. I think they have like 5 different rules enforcement levels. I'm not necessarily advocating that for Warcry, but I am. We could do 2 enforcement levels, right? And I think that would be reasonable. Something like that.
I agree, Dan, too. I think it's hard because Warcry's in a space where it's so unexplored, and so when you find a combo, I think Rob's list from Nova is a fantastic example of a really cool combo that somebody discovered that did kind of rely on people not necessarily being super familiar with it. Even when you know about it, you still have to play around it though. But I think part of what's fun in the game right now is finding those and almost like trying to prevent that from being an experience that you get. Is I also like kind of struggle with it. Don't know if it's good, bad, or otherwise. To not allow it, right? And I like the idea of going, yeah, let's have a single instance maybe where you can see it. You get it described to you, and then you can actually see what's going on with it. But there comes a point certainly where like I'm not going to just keep giving you takebacks on these, these right. opportunities where like it's the whole point of the game. And that I think that's kind of where I was kind of going before. And the Magic one, I figured you would have some really good Magic context for this conversation. Yeah. Obviously it's a really well-established space. But having the understanding the level of play that you're at and what your opponent's at, and then being able to cater that, right? So like, yeah, if it's a brand new person, I'm going to tell you every time, if I play a brand new person in a tournament, typically I'll help you define every single rule, but I'm not going to try to help you beat me necessarily until maybe late game. If I feel like the game's in hand, I'll go, let's talk through some strategy here so you can also get better, because I'm here for a reason. You're here for a different reason. How do we meld those two together? And I think having maybe, again, more clearly defined areas of what, when and how to apply those, again, takebacks is just such an easy example to use for it, but number, when, frequency, all that kind of stuff. I think having this strictly defined area for that is a really good idea.
I'll tell you.
Go ahead, Jason.
Just a real quick interesting thing. It was it Gen Con 2015 or 14? We were at a Gen Con and we were watching a final play of the Star Wars. I just had a brain dump. What's the Star Wars ship base?
X-Wing?
Yeah, X-Wing. We were watching the final championship fight, right? And the guy rolled his defense dice. He missed, or he didn't defend, and it blew his ship up. He reached his hand across the table. They shook hands. Everyone was patting on the back, and then the guy looked down at his card and says, "Oh, wait, I actually have 3 defense." So he picked his other, before he could do anything, he picked up that green dice and threw it, and it was a dodge. And so he's like, "I'm still up, I'm still alive." And like the tournament organizers and everyone had to go take like a 5-minute side channel to see if they were going to let this guy take that thing, because he already shook hands, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, because it wasn't set up in the code of conduct, what happens after you shake hands?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like, to me, it'd be very clear. If you shake hands, you concede.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Yeah.
There's no, oh, wait, here's a take. You don't take back on a concede, right? But it wasn't in the code of conduct. So the TOs had to be called over. This is the last game of the tournament, right? And it was just kind of, everyone was standing around like, this guy's kind of a jerk. Like, you lost the game, but he went for it. So it was interesting.
It's so hard because nobody feels good on those either. Right?
Nobody does.
Right? Like it just completely takes the air out of everything. And it sucks. And there's no way to fix it really other than to go, this is what we said the rule is.
Yep. Yeah. So I want to hit on something that Dan said about like printing out lists and stuff like that. I actually don't think it's as important in Warcry as it is in Age of Sigmar. I think Age of Sigmar, the lists are so long.
Yeah.
You have to know like what weapons people are bringing for each like unit. You got to know what spells they're taking. Like, I mean, there's just artifacts that are happening. There's so much going on in an Age of Sigmar list that's not involved in a Warcry list. With that said, I still think that the conversation needs to happen. And the easiest way to do that, in my opinion, is you set out your warband. Here's my dagger. Here's my hammer. Here's my shield. Here's each unit that's in one of those. Here's each unit that's in one of those. And you can just talk about it, like that you have it right there. And you can point to the model. This is like, here is my big stabba. He's got a 2-inch range. You know what I mean? Like this is, and they have a bonus move if I'm within 6 inches. And so his threat range to attack you at least one time is 10 inches. You know what I mean? Like he can go 10 inches. And I'm not opposed to even taking some of my models, like with the Cruel Boys, and putting it on the side of the table and being like, here's this guy. If this guy moves here, this guy can move in. And like literally demonstrating it happen, like really quickly so that you can kind of see what happens. I don't know that you need a physical paper. And one of the things that we did with the Nova Open is we had all the lists available that anybody could look at them at any time, so that when you're paired up, you could go through and look at that person's list right away without even having to ask for them. So now, does that mean that when you look at that list, you understand what it's doing? No. And I think that there is a little bit of onus on your opponent asking you what your list does. Okay, so what we're saying is, you should be sharing with them. Yes, but they should also be asking as well. What does that guy do? What does that guy do? And it should be an environment where those questions are welcomed. Do you know what I mean? Like where it's okay to ask somebody about their warband, and okay to be like, okay, that guy looks really big. Does he hit hard? Oh, he only has two attacks for each act. Okay, interesting. But it's 5'10". Oh, okay, good to know. You know what I mean? And like, tell me about so how does this reaction work and things like that. So I don't know that you have to have the physical piece of paper in your hand is what I'm saying. But I do think that getting with your models and showing them, saying and pointing at them, I think is more than sufficient in terms of explaining your warband. And I think it's even better because if I know that sometimes when I look at an AOS list in front of me, I'm like, okay, let's just play. I don't know what I'm looking at here. You know what I mean? I don't know what this spell does, and I can ask you and you're going to tell me, and I'm probably going to forget in 5 minutes anyway. Let's just play and see what happens. But that's also me, and kind of how I play. I'm like, okay, but
so we're kind of getting into
go ahead. Sorry.
We're kind of getting into a difference between code of conduct and player best practices here. I mean,
Sure.
What you're talking about isn't necessarily something on either side that could be enforced. You must ask your opponent what their best model is, and they must, objectively
sure.
or but the thing I like about having a printout, and you could never require this, but making sure that your rules are easily accessible for your opponent is, I think, part of playing fairly. And I think a lot of people can easily put their fighters down and say, this guy's sweet. Check him out. He's going to do this to you. And then, especially with the proliferation of Underworlds models into the game, a lot of the time it's this stupid little guy who wins the game, and so explaining every single fighter, I don't know if you guys have had this experience in AOS, but this is one of the only experiences I do have when I play AOS is the player who does not necessarily know what is relevant and not relevant in their AOS list, so they just read you the whole freaking thing.
Yeah.
And they're just their own eyes are going cross-eyed, and they're just reading war scrolls out of their book, and they refuse to start the game until they've read you every war scroll or every allegiance ability word for word, because they've heard that not doing that is bad sportsmanship, but they don't actually have the expertise to really know how to explain it to you in a really effective way. And let's be honest, we're war gamers. Most of us are not dripping with Riz, so we don't really talk all that effectively necessarily, especially to people we aren't already friends with. And so just saying we should be good at talking with our opponents, and we should have these great wholesome conversations. I think that's really easy for the people who have chosen to gab on airways about the game to say, when maybe not everyone in the community is as comfortable with that conversation. So I don't know, again, I know that requiring printouts is really bad practice because not everyone's got time for that. But as far as bringing it into a code of conduct, I would almost like something formal, or something you should, at the very least, you should make sure that your abilities are accessible for your opponent. Something like that.
I think that's fair. And if you're using Best Coast pairings, it's easy if you've uploaded your list to be able to tap on their roster to look at it. Do you know what I mean? And we're getting into an area where I think let me back up a little bit. the goal of this is to start the conversation about creating a community document that it becomes a code of conduct, right? And so, like, I'm going to take the action after this to start putting pen to paper on it, and then going out to the community to kind of like help shape that, right? With some of our folks that want to participate. But one of the we talked about pre-game, during game, the mechanics and stuff like that, and post-game type of stuff. But one of the things that I want to address, because we're kind of coming up on time, if not a little bit over, one of the things I do want to address is the TO's role in creating an environment to help this happen, right? So, for example, two things that I thought of as we were talking tonight is, number one, if we want to have the conversations happen about what your warbands do, we probably need to give a little bit more time for each round.
Mm-hmm.
Because 75 minutes is a good amount of, in my opinion, 75 minutes is a good amount of time to play the game. Like, if we're adding some administrative stuff on the front end of that, like, we probably need to give a little bit more time to be able to sit down and say, okay, like, this is what my warband does. Tell me what your warband does. That's not a conversation that's going to happen in 30 seconds. And so, like, the TO should probably give a little bit more time for that, right? To foster that. And with that said, I'm a big proponent of making sure, or the TO making sure that lists can be accessible, right? So whether that's on a Google Doc sheet that everybody can access, or in Best Coast pairings, if that's what they choose to use, or something else, like fostering the environment so that it's not even an option for the player not to share their list. Like, it's just automatically going to be there. And with the understanding that's that, right? So taking away some of the or not taking away, but putting the onus on the TOs a little bit to help foster like some of these best practices that we're talking about. So those are some thoughts that I had about that.
Okay, and I think what you're saying is the tournament structure, not the TOs, because the TOs are there just to adjudicate, but it's really the tournament structure.
Yeah.
Mike, you're the only one of us who isn't a TO. What?
That's not true anymore.
Oh no, are you?
I did the TTS.
That's true.
Now you're not pure anymore. So.
Yeah.
Next question.
When you're playing, like, what would be the number one thing you would be interested in as far as support from the TO that you're playing with, to in the conversation we're having, like, not necessarily to make sure there's good snacks, even though I do think that's the number one thing TOs should be concerned about. But like, as far as helping players be courteous, gracious players to each other, what would be your number one?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I personally, like, I think this conversation really does run parallel with, as you said, the best practices and just essentially courteous and considerate gaming, right? I think it's really hard to completely separate these two out. And so I think some of the stuff that if you just want to create more of a rigid structure from a TO standpoint, like, hey, this is what we want to lay down every single time. This is what you can expect, as you said, kind of, Justin, that with every single time, this is what you have to do. And then there's best practices within that as well. But so, I mean, stuff like I started playing Elite List because I play slow. I think about every single move deeply and with massive amounts of consideration. So I think having consistent time updates, things like that. And I know, Dan, your tournament, you're really good about giving halfway ones, giving round updates. Like, hey, we're coming up a quarter of the way through, keeping people up to speed with that stuff more. And that's, that's more structural. Facilitating, I guess I try really hard to have a really good time with my opponent when I'm playing. And so I try really hard to foster this positive experience with them. So I don't often feel that I personally need a ton of assistance from a TO, honestly, to do it. Mm-hmm. But some of the things that I really try and do is basically what we've talked about, right? Like making sure that I'm not obfuscating any important information that could possibly be there. So having that, I think the timing becomes an issue because how much time are we putting into the entire tournament? We're playing 4 rounds over a day, or if it's, assuming it's a 4-round, when it's a long day already, we're tacking on another half hour, 45 minutes, just so that we can talk about lists beforehand. Potentially, there's pros and cons to both of those, but I think making sure that that is an expectation, that if, and it, like Justin, the way that you said it, if you do have questions, they should be answered, right? I don't think there should be any time where nobody or somebody does not know that wants to know something about what's going on here. I think maybe you can make an argument that perhaps tactically in game, that's not something that, you know, you need to share, like, how am I going to play this mission? And like, you know, what are my goals with this warband and stuff like that. But knowing what they functionally do is super important. Yeah, I don't think you want to ever have it be the case where you're feeling like you're not aware of stuff with it. But yeah, I think for me, like, the timing one is one of the biggest things, just making sure that people understand where they're at, what they're doing, and, you know, the point of it. I think if you're going, I think there needs to be somewhat of a mindset change, and making it okay to call TOs, right? Like, just like, if you have a question on anything, say, hey, I need someone to come over here, and normalizing that, promoting that as a best practice for any player. And obviously the TOs need to be responsive to that part of it, for sure. Say, yeah, I'm happy to answer these questions without any, you know, come in and
no stigma, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I know, you know, you guys have talked about, like, there's potential bias. We're a small community. People know each other, and you have friends. Turns out everybody likes to know people and have conversations with them. So you can't completely hide that. But coming in with the assumption on both sides that there needs to be objectivity, you know, again, I don't know how you put that necessarily into a code of conduct, but I think that it's more, it's just a mindset that you have coming into it. And trusting that the code of conduct, or you know, any piece of scaffolding that's been created around the tournament is implicit that you're kind of going along until it's been proven otherwise, that it's effective and set in place with best interest in mind.
Yeah. And I also, this is changing the subject a little bit, but part of it, Mike, I think you gave us a really good capstone for what we were just on, and something, since we're running out of time, that I think is probably one of the more important things as Warcry gets bigger, especially given that, not to give a bad name to 40K players, but given that we are starting to, you know, take some folks out of the 40K community who are picking up Warcry, is like, player safety and feeling safe at events, which I think is really important. I think the Warcry community has, you know, has a larger percentage of female players than the wargaming community at large. It has a larger percentage of people who are, there are going to be people who downvote us just for saying the word cis on cast, but who are like cis white men on, you know, like, there is just a like hetero cis white men, like, there's just a smaller percentage, and by smaller I mean it's like 90% instead of 99%, right? But like, that does matter, as far as no one should be uncomfortable for being the only person in the room who looks like they look, you know. And that is something that has come up at a lot of 40K tournaments, where people have made other folks feel unsafe for even showing up, and those people have not been punished generally, historically, at 40K tournaments. And that is something where I would hope that it would be in any code of conduct, that, like, I mean, bringing up the literal Nazi event in Spain that, like, really blew up a couple years ago, is one thing, but, like, I don't know. I would hope that that would be in any code of conduct, and it should not be needed. I've never been to a Warcry event where it was needed, but I've seen plenty of 40K events where it was needed. And so the bigger Warcry gets, the more we'll be pulling from that community. I've been to painting hangouts at LGSs where it would have been needed, right? Where there's been, you know, someone who just really loves guns and has opinions about who guns should be used on, and is just giving those opinions while he's painting. And it's like, dude, what are you, like, what are you doing, man? And like, this was, in this situation, this was a guy who was actually employed by the store, you know, giving these opinions about what types of Americans the guns that his Space Marines have should be used on. I mean, it's
Gosh.
it's incredible stuff, but
Oh,
like
boy.
the fact that, but like that, the wargaming community has those people, and I would hope that any Warcry code of conduct would just make it really clear what's acceptable and what's not.
One of
as far as
inclusion.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think, I think this goes back to what we had said in the beginning and the kind of all-encompassing statement, which is you want to have a good, welcoming, fun game with your opponent, right? Like, be a good person, be a good opponent, right? Like, I mean, I think if you can do those two things, then you're going to have a good experience. And so, giving some of the guardrails, getting some of the best practices of like what that means to be a good opponent and also what it means to be a good person. I think if the community can understand that and say like, okay, this is going to be a tournament run by Tabletop and Beyond, and the code of conduct is in force here. Do you know what I mean? Like this is the code of conduct that we have. This is going to be a tournament run by the Salty Sea. The code of conduct is here. Like when they come to our tournaments, they know that we're using the code of conduct. Like they know that this is a part of the fabric of the event that we are trying to put out. And so I think for it to be effective, and this is what I said to you before the show, Mike, for this to be effective, it needs to be adopted by the community, right? It can't just be Justin, Jason, Dan, and Mike coming up with something and saying, now we're going to enforce this everywhere.
You can't dictate it.
Yeah, it's got to be bought in by the company or by the community and just upheld by the community, because really, at the end of the day, it's kind of our honor system of whether or not we are going to live by it or not. And then if it comes to the attention of a TO, then maybe further action has to be. But the way that it is really effective actually goes back to what you said earlier, Dan, is the best codes of conduct out there are the ones that you don't know exist, because people have already integrated into the culture of their gaming community. And it's there, and they don't have to keep talking about it because it's part of who they are, and it helps build a good community. So, so like I said, I'm going to take the action of starting to put some of the stuff that we talked about down on paper, and then we'll start socializing it a little bit more. And as we get more, a more robust product ready to go, then we'll probably put it out to the larger community that they can, give us some input, and we'll take some of the feedback and try to turn it into something that is going to be usable at any event that wants to use it as a code of conduct for their players. So,
and I think people should be prepared for this to take a few months. This is not going to be something we finish over the course of the next 2 nights and send to people. Yeah,
I think we can get it done in the next few minutes with ChatGPT.
There we go.
I want to see that though. I do want to see what is the best practices. Yeah, within Warcry, according to the ChatGPT, which has produced numerous illegal lists with great logic within those lists. However, I would love to see what that looks like.
Well, they produced a Jade Obelisk list for me that has nothing to do with reality. So, it was pretty amazing. But yeah, so thank you everybody for listening to our show. We appreciate all the support that we get. Come join us on our Tabletop and Beyond Discord. We've got a great, robust Warcry channel. In there, you can get connected with the likes of Mike and Dan. You can get hooked up with our tabletop simulator tournament that is being also run in the big Warcry channel, but sometimes it's easier to find it in ours because we're a smaller channel. So, and there's some interesting discussions that happen in our channel. So we would invite you to come and join us. So thank you everybody for the support. Thank you for listening, and we will see you all at the tables. Have a good night.